We did a tremendous job of showing how good it could be if you just think about, make the matches exciting and compelling, tell great stories so that people will want to come back and see it again. I know to anyone, fighter, and probably my fighters would hate to hear me say this, but the fact is that we're the promoter, we're not the manager. The manager's job is to perpetuate the fighter's career. The promoter's job is to put on the best fights. Not worry about their records, not worry about their names, just think about how do we put on the best fights and progress these fighters' career. And what we found out was that on some occasions where we did an appearance fight, it didn't help the fighters' careers at all. When we put them in as tough as we could, even when they lost, it did advance their careers. Because what you don't want to do is burn your audience, promise them things, and then not deliver them. When I met my late husband, Dan Duva, he was a college student getting ready to go to law school. And he told me, early in our relationship that he had, the family business was boxing. And he informed me that he was going to compete with Don King and Bob Arum someday, and he was going to be the biggest promoter in the sport. And I laughed. And he proved me wrong to laugh at him, because that's what he became. My first job, I was a newspaper reporter. My second job, I was a publicist at a university. So I had the skills required to be the publicist, and so I got enlisted, and that's how it started. Yeah, when we were in school, Lou was the promoter, and he would promote fights locally. Long story short, Dan eventually convinced Lou to let Dan be the promoter, and Dan started to promote the fights, and we started out in an ice rink in Totowa called Ice World, and became a legend. We had put on some really nice fights there and launched a whole bunch of world champions. In 1981, Mike Trainer, who handled Leonard, got really mad at Bob Arum and Don King, and he decided he was going to prove that any idiot could run a major boxing match. So in order to prove that, he hired my husband. And we were given this opportunity to promote the fight between Thomas Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, the first fight, the showdown. By the time the fight was over, we realized that had we known going in what we knew coming out, we would have never tried. But thankfully, we were ignorant enough and pulled it off. It was, at that time, the biggest fight of all time. And the whole world stood still and watched. The anniversary of it just passed recently. People talked about it. It was one of the most amazing nights of my life. We went from being nobody in 1978 to, in 1984, having four young men win world titles. And they were, I think in order, Johnny Bumpus, Rocky Lockridge, Livingstone Bramble, and Mike McCollum. Lou was on the cover of Ring magazine with the 4 fighters. That was a big deal. And that kind of got us started, and then came 1984 and the Olympics. And at that point now we had enough success that we were able to sign some really, really major stars coming out of that Olympics. And they were Evander Holyfield, Pernell, Whitaker, Meldrick Taylor, Mark Breland. We were getting there. By 1984 we were getting there. We really didn't get there until Holyfield won the title in 1990. That kind of put us over the top. At that point, we were able to sign Lennix Lewis and Michael Moore and, quite a few others. We always had a mix of these really elite guys and then these real crowd-pleasing guys that had this following. I was raising 3 in the 80s. I don't remember the 80s. I had 3 small children. I look back and don't know how we ever had the energy to do it all, but it was fun. Dan left our company in a trust and set it up so that the family members would have to work together. My goal in the beginning was just to get away, and because it was not a good situation to be left with. Everybody's grief-stricken, everybody's feeling their pain, everybody thinks their pain's worse than the other person's, and Dan was that glue that held everyone together. Everyone honored and respected him and his word. None of us was qualified to run that company at that point in time. I went to law school, decided to become a lawyer, By the time I graduated, a lot of things had happened, and there the company was still. We still had Pernell, Whitaker, and Lennix under contract. There were big fights coming up, and I wasn't able to just walk away from it. So I saw that through and thought, well, once these fights are over, then we'll close it up, we'll let it go, and it kept going. So we thrived during the time that Lennix and Pernell were fighting, and then on into Arturo Gatti and Fernando Vargas. We had a pretty nice run with them up until we promoted Lewis versus Tyson, again promoting the biggest fight of all time, brought in by HBO and Showtime to promote that fight. We still had it. Back in the early 80s, the promoters, they were always the bad guy. But the truth is, the promoters that were in the sport did it as a full-time job, most of them. Their goal was ultimately to make a profit. That may sound silly, but today we have a lot of people who are in this business because it's a hobby, because they think it would be fun, they have a lot of money, and the only person who used to do that was Don King. He would find somebody to put money up, and he would do that a lot. But the rest of us were having to run a business in a capitalistic manner where you basically, your goal was to keep the sport alive and thriving, because fighters would come through and their careers would progress, and then somebody else would come along and defeat them and move on, because that's the natural progression. What's happened, I think, one of the downsides to the development of fighters starting their own promotional companies and networks dealing directly with them is you have a company that's set up to perpetuate the career of one guy. What happens then is that the natural incentives get thrown out of whack. In the normal world, your job as a promoter is to build and encourage the career of those young fighters and build them up and lead them toward that big fight. Back then, you knew as a promoter that win or lose, you had a business. You were going to keep doing what you were doing. You were going to keep bringing up talent and teaching people and giving them opportunities, and understood that at some point fighters will be on the decline and they're going to lose. And those fighters, if they lost, they would still fight. They would still have interest. They would still have a career. What's happened is the incentives have gotten so twisted and perverted that if you lose a fight, your career's over. But if you keep winning against really weak opposition, that's okay. And the day that became the norm, that's when things went wrong. I was so happy to see HBO, once management there changed, opening the door to Gennady Golovkin, who truly, I think Tomas kind of started it rolling. Gennady opened the door, and then Sergey Kovalev just ran right through it. We've opened a door now to, half of Eastern Europe. Remember, they used to beat us in the amateurs all the time. They have great training, they have great trainers, they have great facilities. And I think we've caught this wave of fighters who grew up in the Soviet system, and then it kind of disintegrated, and they were kind of left with, nothing. And so they said, okay, this amateur thing has to stop. I've got to come over here now, which is why they're all in their late 20s and early 30s coming here. Now, we recognize people just want to see fighters who are exciting and compelling and fun to watch. They don't care where they came from or what language they speak. People from Europe are great athletes. And if they're fun and exciting to watch, we'll follow them. Why not? It's got nothing to do with where you were born. If there's a woman in business who tells you she never detected a sense of unfairness, she's lying. And it's not just in the boxing business, it's in the whole wide world. Those of us who endeavored to join the club have to be better than everyone they compete with. And that's not just in boxing. That's a woman in business. That's how it works. Girls tend to work well in groups. Our style tends to be more to anticipate a problem and solve it before it happens, whereas it's been my experience, guys tend to let the problem happen and then solve it. And that, when you're in a short time frame where you've got no time to get things done, the fight's starting at 9 o'clock and they better be in the ring, you don't get a chance to, you don't get another 15 minutes. In that kind of a business, not having problems occur really does make things move much more smoothly. And we're real detail oriented, or at least the women who work for me are. I'm not, but the people that work for me are, and they've got checklists and they make sure everything gets done. And we just kept working. And then my daughter decided to come and work with us. She was a lawyer and she asked, can I come work for you? And I said, you know, she was in a firm and she couldn't take it anymore. And I said, well, you can be my intern. I don't have any money to pay you. And she proceeded to make herself invaluable, so I had to pay her. And, you know, now we're all women still doing this. I don't know. There's just, I think, a problem-solving attitude that everyone has, and it seems to work well. Kathy Duva is a mom who ended up with a very interesting job and is still having a lot of fun doing it.